President, when I re-ran for the Senate in 2010, there were two major issues that dominated the campaign and that continued to dominate the discussion and debate here in the Senate post-election. One was the Affordable Care Act, now called Obamacare, which was pushed through without any bipartisan support, and there was a lot of concern among the American people as to what the impact this would have on their lives. That was an issue of intense discussion and debate during that campaign. The second was the plunge into debt at a level Americans had never seen before in the history of the country. You know, it took nearly 200 years from the beginning of our nation until 1981 to reach the $1 trillion debt mark. That's a lot of governing. That's a lot of growth of America. But we were essentially on a path that, including expenditures for the war and so forth, that didn't take us deeply into debt relative to our gross domestic product. All of a sudden, in 2010, the revelation that we had reached the $10 trillion mark, a tenfold increase in just less than 30 years, when it took 190 plus years to get to the first trillion, it only took 30 years to add 10 times that amount. And that was a hot topic of debate during that election. In that election, American people came out in significant numbers and basically said, get to Washington and do something about this. In the background, the debt clock was ticking away, not only on my website, but in clocks around the country at different times, and people were astonished at how fast those numbers were churning. That led then to a pretty intense effort on the part of both parties, on the part of many organizations. We remember the Simpson-Bowles, former Chief of Staff of President Bill Clinton, along with a former distinguished senator from Wyoming, a Republican and a Democrat, together, Simpson-Bowles. Public was getting behind this, a $4 trillion over 10-year fix to the problem, and it was pretty dramatic, and yet there was a lot of momentum for it. It was shot down, unfortunately, by the president when it was presented. And then following that, we had the Gang of Six, a bipartisan effort, the super committee, the group of 12, 6 Democrats, 6 Republicans, all working diligently to try to put something together. Outside organizations fix the debt. Any number of the Domenici, Revlin, I mean, any number of proposals that were worked on together in a bipartisan way, realizing that as the debt was continuing to accumulate, is going to have major negative consequences to the future of our children and grandchildren, and perhaps even our own generation. We stand here today, having gone through all of that, the dinner committee, which I was part of, 8 of us, agreeing with the president, no staff, no press, closed room, months and months and months of negotiation, only once again to come up short with even the most minor. Ultimately, I mean, we sacrificed so many things that we thought we needed to do to get something going. Once again, shot down in the end by a president who really wasn't willing to accept even the provisions that he had proposed in his budget proposals or publicly proposed. We took those and said, can we at least do these? Mr. President, you've announced that you'll support, this is your initiative. No go. Well, as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I then tried to work with various agencies. All had to come before us to make their requests known for the coming year. And I talked to them about, I said, do you have a Plan B in place? What do you mean, Plan B? What's Plan B all about? Well, Plan B is the fact that mandatory spending is running away with our budget, and the available amount of money for your discretionary spending is shrinking every year. So what is your Plan B in terms of having less money available, whether it's for health care, whether it's for education, whether it's for building roads, all the discretionary issues that fall under discretionary spending that we're in control of? I said, we no longer have control, and that's shrinking, and you're going to have to do more with less. And I asked that they provide a Plan B before they could get my clearance in terms of supporting their requests. they never came forward. No, we have to stay with what the president's budget is and so forth. Here we are now. $8 trillion more than we were in 2010, and an $18 trillion plus deficit. Everyone knows this is unsustainable. Everyone in America knows that we are careening toward insolvency, inability to cover some of the most basic functions of government. I talked to agencies about a policy of triage. I said, well, what about this? Separate out what you absolutely essentially have to do, and let's fund it. And then class part B is what you'd like to do if you had the money to do it. Part C is, why are we doing that in the first place? Or that program is long past its need, its existence, or it hasn't worked. And so let's start there with the Part C. Let's get rid of excess spending that has no real function going forward, or is duplication, or is fraud, or waste, or whatever, which leads me now to this chart. I'm kind of going from, as a President's Chief of Staff decide, Coach, you're the go big guy in terms of what we need to do. We can't go there, but maybe we can go little. Well, we're all the way down to now what I call waste of the week. Let's at least identify those things that CBO, Government Accounting Office, Congressional Budget Office, GAO, Government Accounting Office. Let's identify those things that we know don't work. We know are a waste. We know are a duplication. And let's see, at least we can get some start in terms of dealing with this debt. Senator Coburn took the lead on that in the last several sessions of Congress. We're going to miss him because no one could do it better than he did in pointing out and really embarrassing a lot of us of why are we funding that. I'm not trying to take his place, but I did, with my staff, come up with the idea of at least let's let our colleagues know that those who say we can't cut a penny more, we've cut too much, have a fund to look at that basically says, yeah, we can cut more. We can do at least something to address this debt or have money to offset a needed funding program. So waste of the week, we're going to inaugurate it today. And in its debut, I'm going to go back to something that I tried to amend when we were addressing the unemployment insurance issue, and ultimately was not able to offer the amendment, thanks to the majority leaders filling the tree and not allowing any amendments. Made a big stink about it, and can't understand why we couldn't at least take this up. So waste of the week this week is the cost to the taxpayer for those in the safety net receiving Social Security disability insurance or unemployment insurance, getting checks from both agencies. Now, if you can prove to the government agency that you can't work, you can be eligible if you go through the process for Social Security disability insurance. But if you go to Social Security disability insurance agency and make your claim, you can't then go to the unemployment insurance agency and say, I can't work, I can't find work, I'm able to work, but I need to get that check from you. What has been documented now is the fact that there are a very significant number of people that are gaming this issue and are receiving checks from both agencies. I mean, either you can work or you can't work. You're eligible for one safety net program or the other, but not both. That totals $5.7 trillion of duplication. And so my amendment that I had offered under unemployment insurance extension in the last Congress was simply to say you can't do both. And we're going to put procedures in place so that we can find out who's doing both. Now, you would think this would be pretty simple in even a paper age, but we're in the digital age. And I don't understand why people at Social Security Disability Agency, people administering that, can't simply take a Social Security number and plug it in to unemployment insurance and say, do you have this person's name with this Social Security number? Are they receiving unemployment insurance, or vice versa? It ought to be a push of a button on a computer to be able to do that. So it's not all that costly. It makes a great deal of sense. The worst you could do is pick up the phone and say, I have John Doe here, his Social Security number is X. He's applying for Social Security disability. Do you have him on the unemployment roll, or vice versa? I'm sorry, Mr. Doe, but you can't do both, and you're gaming the system. And that duplication of benefit costs $5.7 billion. That's a pretty good savings. And this is the first of what is going to be a weekly presentation of programs that are no longer needed, that are duplication, that there's fraud or waste involved. And I'm going to bring that forward every week, and we're going to try to add all that up. We start here with 5.7, and I got my thermometer. I've got it going up to 100 billion. I think we can go much higher than that. Tom Coburn said we could with all his, through his waste book and the work that he's done. So we've already inked in here. Probably ought to put that in green. If it's red, that looks more like a deficit. Green looks more like we're heading in the right direction. In any event, we're going to start filling this thermometer by coming here every week. And people say, well, that's small change. Well, look, 5.7 billion is not small change. 100 billion is not small change. In comparison to our debt, does it solve the problem? Absolutely not. Is at least a start. Can we at least not come together and in sensible things like this, at least get started in the right direction? In the meantime, I still think we're going to be pushed into a situation by crisis when no longer the confidence of the investment world in America in terms of the rate of return is acceptable because of the debt that continues to accumulate. So here we are, back to 2010, back to where we were. I know it's not talked very much about these days. We have foreign policy issues that all we have to engage in, and we have domestic issues that we have to engage in, but ticking away on the clock, minute after minute, second after second, is a continued plunge into deficit spending, borrowing money that we don't have in order to pay for things that we need, but also paying for things that we don't need. And so, waste of the week, you'll hear me every week up here with a new proposal, and hopefully we'll be filling this chart, and hopefully it'll at least start us on the process once again of getting to one of the major challenges that we have here in this United States Senate and Congress and executive branch, and that is dealing with our debt. It's generational theft. It is putting burden on our children and grandchildren, and even on workers here today. It's holding down our economy. It's something that is one of the major challenges which this Congress has not successfully addressed, which this administration has not successfully addressed. It's kicking the can down the road to the extreme. And we do not need to forget that. We need to emphasize that. And this is my small step after many large steps that have failed to try to continue to alert the American people and alert my colleagues that there is money we can save and spend and run a much more efficient, effective government. Mr. President, with that, I yield the time and